guest here because I have known Risa Sheppard for many, many years, and she's the co-founder of BAM Therapy. She's been a leading mind, body, and spirit fitness expert for over 45 years. Risa trained and instructed with legendary Pilates teacher Ron Fletcher. In 1980, that's huge. In 1980, Risa created the Sheppard Method, an innovative Pilates program that is the basis for BAM therapy exercise. And she lives and works in LA with her beautiful dog. So welcome, Risa Sheppard.
Hi, Risa.
Hi,
welcome.
Risa. Hi.
Thank you
why did I think you were from New York? I don't know why I thought that.
Everybody thinks I'm from New York.
Because you have a New York thing, yeah.
It's really weird. I was born and raised in Los Angeles.
Yes, wow. She's like me, a native. Yeah.
And, I said, I don't know. But I have some sort of a New York
Think about it. I ran into another lady this week, same thing. I said, you must be from New York. So no, I was born and raised in Los Angeles. I said, wow.
I know. I mean, literally. I mean, it gets under 65 and I'm ready for, the fireplace and hot chocolate. It's like, recently it's been crazy with this weather. Yeah. So
tell us how you got involved in the whole field, the Pilates. And at that time,
you were one of the first, weren't you?
One of the pioneers, really.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was I had just graduated. I was one of those would-be little actresses here in LA too.
Weren't we all? Yes.
Who is it? But I studied acting. I was at UCLA, but I always loved movement, and I was always, for some reason, cast in plays and stuff where I was like the witch. And I'm not a dancer. I wasn't, a professional dancer, but I just always loved movement. And even in those days, the aerobic hard kind of that wasn't my thing. I liked more of a inner work. And I was home one day reading about this new place that opened in Beverly Hills by a man named Ron Fletcher, who brought over this thing called, actually, they didn't call it Pilates in those days. It was body controlology.
Really?
Really more because control of the body. That's what Pilates called.
Wow.
I don't know when or why it all of a sudden turned to Pilates. Well, there's a lot of stories. I mean, I could, anyway, so I said, well, this sounds kind of interesting. This sounds like something I'd like to try. I mean, I went and I fell in love with the work. I mean, I got to it like a duck to water. I fell in love with the work. And of course, in those days, they didn't have certifications or anything like that. I just loved the work. And Ron said, well, actually, I was doing a soap opera a little bit. And then I had to quit because they fired me. And I said, I just, I'm not doing the soap opera anymore. And he said, well, why don't you, work here, teach here? And I was like, really? Yeah. So I just started working there, and
Beverly Boulevard. Was it Beverly Boulevard?
No, it was Beverly Drive.
Beverly Drive.
I'm sorry. It was Rodeo.
No, I don't remember that. But that was a place in Beverly. Okay.
Do you remember Aida Gray at all?
I do, very much.
Yeah, Aida Gray. She was a big cosmetic.
Yeah, huge.
And she had a big office right on the corner of Rodeo and Wilshire.
Yeah.
And then he had, I guess, it was sort of the attic right there that they opened up, and they just made it a Pilates studio. So we were above Aida Gray for a long time. Wow. And like I said, in fact, I just fell in love with it because like I still say to this day, I felt like a dancer without being a dancer.
Did you have a transformer machine?
Pardon me?
Did you have the machine, the transformer? Is it called the transformer?
It's the reformer.
I'm sorry, the reformer. For me, it was a transformer. For the reformer.
It could be a transformer as well.
It transformed me, I'll tell you, since I've done Pilates. Was there a reformer then? You had that? Was that?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I walked in this.
I don't know if it was just bands then. Okay.
Oh, yeah. I walked in this room and there were reformers and there was a Cadillac. There was a thing called Cadillac, which was the creme de la creme of Pilates, day. So he made it, called it the Cadillac because it was the best in the world. And We had reformers, and we did mat classes, without reformers. We did it all. And then it was funny. I mean, here I'm just this kid. I'm 22 years old, right? And all of a sudden, Ron turns to me and he goes, "Go work this guy out." And it was Ben Vereen.
Oh my gosh! Remember Ben Vereen, the dancer?
He was a huge star.
Wow, he was huge, Ben Vereen, huge.
So I was like, "Moi, you want moi to work out this famous dancer?"
Wow.
And he said, "Yeah." So I guess that was my certification. I don't know, but I loved working there. And then Ron sort of semi-retired about 1980. And there was no Pilates. Aerobics was the big deal, and nobody heard what Pilates was. And it wasn't really going places, but somebody wanted me to come to their home. And I said, there was a lady who could never get it. Oh, if only somebody would come to my home. Remember, she was British. And I said, "Well, I will." And so I got to, go from being paid $5 an hour to I charged like $20 an hour to go to her house. Of course, this was, in the Middle Ages. Anyway, and I did that for quite a long time, and nobody still ever really heard of Pilates. There was just maybe one or two places in LA. And then it just started getting a name for itself. And I said, the main reason why I called it the Sheppard method is because it was including, well, it was body contrology to me. And also, but I did a lot of hands-on and stretching, and I started studying a lot. And nobody ever heard until I guess in the 90s, it started to kind of bloom. And a client of mine was getting some physical therapy, and she said, "Well, my trainer knows Pilates." And he was like, "Really? Somebody knows Pilates?" So I was hired by him to train their physical therapist in this weird new thing called Pilates, and that was it. And then it was always a dream to have my own studio, but so I saved money, and it finally came to pass that I opened up the studio. Although I loved going, I didn't mind as long as I was teaching. I loved teaching people. I loved helping people. I just loved all of it. And then within a short time, I decided, first of all, I started getting more TV work as a fitness expert than as a Pilates. So I thought, well, this is better. This is kind of cool. And I just dropped the acting and stuck with Pilates because it was giving me so much satisfaction. And it's something you can do. You don't get too old at 35 for it. In fact, if anything, it's something you can do until your last days in your 90s or hundreds. And that's it.
Wow. Well, tell us, how did you get involved with, because Risa wrote an incredible book along with, we should say, your partner, Dr. David Tannenbaum, who's not with us today. He had a situation. He couldn't attend tonight.
Yes.
His mother passed.
He had a death in the family.
Yeah,
so
there you go. But they wrote a fabulous book, Mindful Movement. And so can you tell us all of what BAM therapy is? Heal your back pain with BAM therapy. Tell us about BAM therapy and how did you guys come up with this?
Well, I've been involved with Science of Mind.
Explain what Science of Mind is.
A new thought it's basically a new thought movement, as they call it, where really your thought creates a lot of your reality, and not really but your reality and how you feel and how you move in the world. And it was like Pilates. My first Science of Mind, not Scientology. I would always know it's not Scientology, but I went, I fell for that. Like I fell for Pilates, In fact, if anything, I grew my whole business on the principles of Science of Mind. And it's just creating the God, not creating the God. It's not, it's being in touch with that inner knowing and that God, if you want, within you that knows everything. It's all within you. And all without us too, but it's within you. And I liked it because I was, not really brought up terribly religious. My parents were both Catholic, but they wanted us to choose our own religion. And this just really spoke to me because it included meditation, it included positive affirmations, it included a mind treatment, which I include a lot in this book, as you know, that I still do to this day for myself. And that's basically like a scientific prayer, basically. It's instead of saying, oh, dear God, please give me this for my birthday or whatever, you go in and you affirm for yourself that this is so right now. And that whatever the situation may be, instead of pleading to somebody, you just affirm that it's happening right now, that is within you right now, and that you create a whole world with that. I mean, just an understanding, and your mind shifts from, we all have our bad days. Listen, I can have my pity parties and like the best of us, and then I go, stop. Go within, find the truth within, and ask that spirit that knows much more than you do what's going on. And as I said, I just loved the work. And then I felt with the Pilates and how I came up with it. And then David, of course, is a very, very good friend of mine, like sort of you and James here. He's he's a chiropractor, and I've known him for about 30 years, and we just found that our methods really meshed in so many ways because, if you have a physical problem, a physical ache, whether you have a hip ache or a back ache or a headache, of course, we like chiropractic or anything medical that works. We like chiropractic because it's holistic. That the only thing that stops many times the healing is what you're thinking. In other words, like I always say, if you hate your thighs and you go, I hate my thighs, no amount of leg lifts are going to make it thin. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I would see people sabotaging themselves so much. And so I got very involved, like with Louise Hay from Hay House. So this is basically, I get a lot of information from her. And my Bible is, I have it around here, I have several of Louise Hay's book, but Heal Your Body. And I became fascinated with the mental equivalence that each part of the body did represent. For instance, your cervicals, if you have really tight cervical is your neck, many times. Not necessarily, I'm not saying these things is what you have. These are all mental equivalents. What could be, it's a fear of looking at all in all directions. So people are very, very stiff like that. A hip problem can represent many times not being able to move forward in life.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. What does a sprained ankle represent?
Well, a sprained ankle, that's a lot of I don't really know off the top of my head. I could grab a book and see but it's because I don't deal with sprained ankles very often. But again, the ankle is our foundation. Right. So there's something that's making you feel possibly a sprained ankle is just a loosening of the foundation starting to wobble a little bit, and so you could find that. And what's neat is that when you go in, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist. I always laugh though, but I play one on TV. But anyway, so I'm not going in and saying, tell me about your childhood, but we together, I've learned, because I spent several years studying, going in and doing, again, the spiritual mind treatment and trying to, what you want to do is, it's like you want to untie the mental knot along with the physical knot. That's really what it is. And it's the Trinity. It's the Trinity of movement. It's the mind, body, and spirit. And one thing that I have found with Pilates in the last few years is that spirit is just kind of out of it now. Everything is body, mind, even though BAM means body and mind. I just thought of that. But it's also, if I could put an S there, it would be body, mind, and spirit. It's those three things, and it's who you are. So like Joe Pilates would say, you work the body in front of you. I even take it more and I say, you work the person in front of you, because you get somebody in front of you who's like so afraid of whatever it may be, or has this going on and can't maybe their hips are bothering them because they can't move. Their middle back is really, really tight, which represents many times the love in your life. And connecting a lot with the yoga chakras, which I haven't studied really well, but it kind of corresponds with that. Or the lower back can represent a lot. Well, that's, the whole, why I started with the spine is because it's your whole support system.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And so it's hard to feel, especially in today's world, feeling supported by any.
Sure.
So I'm surprised we're just not all crumbling down to having, to the floor. So what I do is just, I have exercises for everything. I mean, your back hurts. I have exercises for that. I have movements. It's all in here. But we're not.
Risa, can I ask you a question? When you see somebody, you see private clients, I assume, right? And you do a studio, or you go to their house, or?
Well, I do workshops in my studio and seminars, but I will do privately too. And I usually have them come to my studio. I haven't come to the home. I don't do a lot. I haven't done a lot of privates, but I do privates.
I just have some interesting questions, because I'm a Pilates fan. I love Pilates. And I'm just starting a whole new session with Pilates. I stopped for a year and now I'm back to it. And I love Pilates. And of course, sort of with ballet, a lot of dancers took Pilates. Just something occurred to me when you were speaking. And this might sound a little far out, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. Are there certain movements in Pilates that you use with certain affirmations, or can you use certain affirmations with certain positions?
Well, as a matter of fact,
just asking.
As a matter of fact, let me just check this book. Yes, there are.
Okay.
Yes, that affirmations are a very big part of it, because when I say mind treatment, nobody's really going to, I will do that for you in a workshop or in a private session, but finding an affirmation that you should use, you could use before you work out, as you're working out, anytime during the day as you're walking down the street. I am free of, I'm feeling free. I'm feeling secure. I'm feeling supported. I am supported. Not really, because I like to use the I am. I am supported. As you're maybe doing some nice abdominals, or as you're strengthening the spine, you're creating in your mind that you are supported by the universe, by God, by whichever you like to call it. I am supported by life and you do your trick. Like they used to say, like, you got to treat and get off your feet, so you can't just sit here and go, I am this, and, do something. And I'll never forget, I was sitting on a chair for a while once, and I got up and I don't have hip problems, but my hip was like, what is going on here? And I went, knowing, of course, what hips mean. And, I'm going, where am I? Okay. So then I would just use the affirmation that I move freely forward. I am not afraid to move forward. Actually, or whatever affirmation I came up with. And then I also did the exercise that helped the hip with it, so it's a whole holistic way of working.
Wow. It's amazing.
But that's, the affirmations are extremely.
And I agree with you. Science of mind to me is like a religion. When I first came to Los Angeles, I was on a bus going down Sunset Boulevard. And I, like you, was raised Catholic, but I didn't really believe in it. But I was looking at this before anything psychic. And I was going down this bus on Sunset Boulevard, and we stopped in front of the church, Religious Science. And I felt a connection with that. And I've been a member of that. I started doing
Dr.
that.
Bitzer?
Yeah, right on Sunset Boulevard.
I studied with him for
yeah,
years.
I studied with I studied him 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I was with him for years.
That was my first foray into
He died, I think. I mean, he
passed. And then I went to the Bodhi Tree, of course, and studied church religion through the books I read.
I used to live around the corner from the Bodhi Tree.
I'm sure I've seen you there.
And I used to walk down to the Earth Cafe and I used to, grab a little latte, and then I'd go over to the Bodhi Tree. Oh, sure.
Every weekend, I was there every Saturday. That's where I spent. That's where I learned my craft, I guess you should say.
The Bodhi Tree is not there anymore.
Oh, no.
It
was a very sad day. Were you, James?
Yeah, they offered me to buy it. The two owners I knew very well, and it didn't make sense. And then who knew it was going to happen with Prince? And it was sad because it was a really incredible
place.
It was.
Yeah.
I used to spend hours in there. I don't know why things just changed.
And the used bookstore in the back, wasn't that fun to go to?
Yes, it was. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I have a comment here. Chris Sigalo said, I started out in the aerobic fitness movement 45 years ago too. I have continued with the blending of being a somatic experience practitioner. Good for you. I have followed the same mind, body, spirit connection. I love that this is on tonight. I was thinking about somatic experience as you were talking about what you do. I mean, it's the constant, the body, the mind, the spirit. The way you're
we're not robots. If we were robots, we'd go lift the arm, turn like that, and there would be nothing else going on in there. But what makes that, it's that, what is that spirit? What is that thing in us that causes?
Lisa, let's talk about stress in the life of people. Because what does stress do? The relationship between stress and pain and disease.
Well, that's major.
Yeah, I would think so. I would think that it would break bodies down.
It does break. It can. And it can do it in many different ways. And I have several examples in here and what I've done. I mean, everything from, job stress to relationship stress to, financial stress.
Sure.
And the back really takes its toll on the stress. I mean, the stress seems to like to go right to that spine that holds it all together, and like you're having trouble or whatever it is, it can also, of course, lead to headaches. I mean, major headaches. It can even lead to cancer. I mean, it's prevalent, and that's why it's so important to, number one, keep moving. You've got to move your mind. You've got to move your body.
Sure.
And without movement, like Ron used to always say, movement is life and life is movement.
It's so true.
So, yes, stress can be alleviated. Meditation, of course, is a wonderful tool that we all can use. Affirmations, breath. Ron was really into percussive breathing. I don't know if you know what percussive is.
I don't.
Okay. Well, that was his thing. Everybody, we all have our own thumbprints on it. And he was an elder, and percussive breathing was just heavy inhaling through the nose and exhaling through the mouth, but like really expelling, And Joe Pilates himself says you got to breathe in and you breathe out. And I cannot tell you how many people do not breathe.
I mean, they hold their breath. Yeah.
Lately, I mean, I tell my students, and I do teacher training, and I say, you guys, you've got to breathe. You just have to breathe, and you have to really breathe. You have to let the air in, and you have to let out all that gunk. And so, but percussive breath to him was just. So a lot of people are very intimidated by that, but.
Risa, let me interrupt you, but I think as you're speaking, this just hits my head, so I got to share it because I'll forget it. But as you're saying that, maybe visualizing as you're breathing in a certain area of the body to giving that breath of life to that part of the body, the shoulder. Or the
absolutely.
chest, right?
Absolutely.
That would help. Yeah.
Sure. And it's breathing in, and it's breathing, the center. You've heard of the core.
Yeah.
Well, that Joe never really called it the core. Those are muscle groups. Those are like the transverse abdominis. They're names, but it is the center of the body. So I call it the center. Like when we're all crazy, sometimes we have to center ourselves. It's the same with the body. We have to, right? I'll just stand up here. I don't know if you can tell, but it's about an inch below the belly button and about an inch above the tailbone. And you imagine, I have this in the book too. You imagine a rod running through your hips from one side to the other, and then one going through your stomach from, again, below the belly button and in between there, where those points meet inside your body, I like to use, like, you could think of just a big ball of white light that is the place where all movement flows from. So one of the reasons for all of the pain is like you just most people just lift their arms, and then, oh my God, they start having all this pain in their shoulder. But if you imagine that this is all starting from the center, your arm is starting from the center. When you lift your arm, you're incorporating all of the muscles along with the stomach, and it's much less work and strain on the joint. It's all coming from here. And it should be the same when you walk. Most people walk down the street and their head is bobbing or they're stooped over. But if you can walk from that center.
Risa, when I do Pilates, which I one of the greatest things about Pilates for me was once I got working with that core, I was conscious of that core 24 hours a day. As I walked the street, I became aware of that core. And you really start becoming aware of it, mindful of it all the time, which is phenomenal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because the core is where I've also heard it called the powerhouse, or Joe called it the center or whatever. Yeah.
Seat of knowing. Yeah.
And automatically when you're aware of it, your posture will improve. Totally. I've had clients that come in and they're all stooped over or whatever, and then I teach them the whole centering and also the butt too. It's very important to squeeze the butt to get that caboose always working with you. That's part of the core too. And so you become like a spiral and you're a cylinder as opposed to just one-dimensional or two-dimensional or.
It just seems like it's a real, like you say, powerhouse, but getting that core space and that mind, it feels such a strength in that. It is. You make choices in life. It's coming from that strength point that you have that. And
exactly. And you have that strength point. And when you combine it with affirmations and understanding that it still could be from a trauma when you were 3 years old and you fell
absolutely
off a bike, that, and all sorts of things. I had a lady recently, and she was really tight in her thoracic, or the middle of her back. That spine, and just you couldn't even do anything with it. Well, you can't really move that part much, but there was a lot of pain, I should say, and I said, have you just broken? Do you have anything about love? Do you have a problem at all with, I don't know exactly the words I use, but anyway, she started crying and she said, yes, because, my mother never loved me and she told me she never loved me. And I was like, oh my God, honey, So we did some exercises and affirmations and, so that's you. And the interesting thing that I like about using the science of mind principle, you can use any principle you like, but you don't necessarily have to always know the exact thing that's bothering you. You can go within and just say, there is that within me that knows what the answer to this is, and I am open to receiving the answer.
And Risa, there's a great expression, which I might be getting wrong, so I'm paraphrasing, but the body follows the mind, right? So the thoughts, right? So the body follows the mind. What you think, the body will.
The mind controls the body. Yes, but that's
really true.
Yeah. No, yeah. And where mind goes, energy flows too.
That's right. That's another one. That's a great one.
That one, I really see, because I
write that one down again.
When I'm working with a client, I can tell automatically when they're going off somewhere, and I'm like, let's come on back, the mind where energy flows.
Such a good one. It's a great one.
Well, that's basically what the book is about, where energy flows.
What is the name of your book again?
Mindful Movement.
You read one of the very, very first.
I did.
You did, James. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I finally did it, James.
I'm very happy for you. Really am. I'm really thrilled for you.
There was a lot of.
It's an accomplishment that you did that, Risa. It's a real accomplishment.
Same. Well, thanks, Risa. It was wonderful to have you on tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for.
You've been listening to Both Sides Now and Beyond, featuring spiritual medium and master teacher James Van Praagh and spiritual medium and psychotherapist Kellee White.
That was great. Maybe we changed some lives.
And maybe opened up some minds.
Which way do I turn?
Right. I mean left.